This is the worst podcast I've ever been on.
These guys are shit. It's true. It's true.
This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Our traveling fanboys, 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 our traveling fanboys.
Welcome everyone to the longest running weekly episodic comic book podcast in all
Place to Be Nation.
I am Greg Phillips, your co-host in this journey through this thing called life. With me, as always, my partner in crime, the illustrious, the legendary, the infamous Nick Duke, and we are the hard traveling fanboys. Emphasis on traveling.
Boys.
The hyphen between hard and traveling. Now, Nick, how are you doing on this fine eve? I understand that Irish eyes are upon us this week.
Oh, are they? I heard, from what I understand, I earned some Irish scoring the other night, and I would like to take this opportunity to issue a very heartfelt and sincere apology from the deepest cockles of my heart.
What about the subcockles?
Those two. Whatever makes you feel better.
Well, nothing makes me
Actually,
feel better.
none of that's true. I don't regret a damn thing.
Nothing makes me feel better in life, Nick. It's all useless. What's the point of this whole thing anyway?
I don't know. To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of the women?
No, you know what? You know what does bring me joy, though? What does bring me joy is Arnold saying, Dominic! Whenever I'm feeling bad, I just think about that.
I need to get Arnold in to be in this Ray and Dominic feud on Raw.
You're reading my mind, Nick. Have Arnold
feud. I keep calling it a feud, even though it isn't a feud yet.
Not yet. They need whenever Dominic comes back and he betrays his own father, his own flesh and blood, Arnold needs to come in and be the mediator and say, "Come here, Dominic. I want you to explain to me why you're doing this to your father."
Maybe they can bring back Chavo as a part of this.
Let's not go too far. Let's not go too far. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But I think Arnold would tote the water here. Vicky would make sense to bring back.
Yeah, but wasn't the deal that Eddie had sex with Ray's wife?
Yes.
So why would you would think Vicky would be anti-Dominic, not pro-Dominic?
Well, exactly. Well, but Vicky can come back and say that she's changed her mind, that now, oh gosh, this would be in such horrible taste. But she can say that Dominic is a reminder of Eddie's legacy, not Ray's. And then Arnold can come in and say, "Vicky, what are you doing? Don't you see they're driving a wedge between Ray and Dominic?" This would be great. It needs to happen. Anyway, that's beside the point. We are the Hard Traveling Fanboys. We are back to you after a raucous weekend. I went to the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. Nicholas went to Sanford Stadium. No, he didn't. Where did you go, Nick?
Sanford Stadium with an N.
Yeah.
Not an M.
Sanford Stadium is a different thing entirely.
Yes, that's in Alabama, and I have not. I don't think I know. I've never been there. Yes, I went to Athens, Georgia for the Notre Dame Georgia football game, and had a grand old time.
Had a few drinkaroonies, didn't you? There
might have been a couple.
Sucked back on Grandpa's old cough syrup, huh?
There might be one or two, maybe one or two.
What? Huh? Anyway, the point of this episode, why are we here today? This is the Longbook Hunters. This is our
Indeed it is.
our monthly examination of a classic comic book story, a trade collection, a graphic novel, etc. And this was actually the first Longbook Hunters episode that we put up to a listener poll. And as you know, Nick,
we sure did.
The ones and ones of HTF listeners made their voices heard. By God,
they sure did. And tell us a little bit, Greg, about the candidates that were entered into this poll.
Well, we just a little by way of backstory. Nick and I know nothing about the Legion of Superheroes outside of what we have seen in Justice League Unlimited and Supergirl, the live action show. So,
that within the group of people we know, it's primarily loved by our old, who yelled at us a few months back whenever we didn't like Kurt Busiek and George Perez's Avengers run.
Yes.
So we were convinced we were going to have a similar outcome here.
It was an event that was so controversial that it actually united Ben Morse and Todd Weber in unity against the hard-traveling fanboys. And it scarred us, quite frankly. It scarred us so badly that we said, all right, well, we're not going to tackle any of these stories anymore because they're sacred cows. We're damned if we do and damned if we don't, unless we just fall in line with the popular narrative about these, right? Well, at a certain point, it came to my attention that we don't know anything about the Legion of Superheroes, but we need to give them a chance, by God. Because I had made comments Nick has made comments about the Legion being DC's X-Men, essentially. Incredibly convoluted, wild, incredible backstories, multiple reboots, etc., etc. And we were just intimidated, quite frankly, by the Legion. But we put up to the reader poll some of the stories that were mentioned to me as the greatest Legion stories of all time, or at least the Legion stories that would be most likely to attract a new reader. One of which, brought up by Ben Morris, his favorite Legion story of all, The Great Darkness Saga. Then I thought, I'm going to rig this poll to a degree, because if there's one guy that could get us to understand and appreciate the Legion, who would it be?
Jeff Johns, of course.
It would be Jeff Johns, exactly. And so I decided to put the Superman and the Legion of Superheroes Jeff Johns story up on the poll. And in full candid nature here on the show here, and I'll tell you this as well, Nick, because I don't think I mentioned this. I had the poll together, and then a thought occurred to me. What if people don't know that Superman and the Legion of Superheroes is a Jeff Johns story? What if they think I'm just referring to some random Superman and the Legion of Superheroes story? I know. I'll throw in a story that everybody knows is a Jeff Johns story and put that up for the poll. So
without taking down the other Jeff Johns story.
I put on Final Crisis Legion of Three Worlds. So we had three options, and it came down to the wire, but the Great Darkness Saga won out over Superman and the Legion of Superheroes by a narrow margin, something like 44% to 36% or something like that. And with all that being said, here we are. We arrive at our destination. We have consumed one of the most famous, maybe the most famous Legion of Superheroes story. I've certainly heard of this story for years. I've never read it. Didn't really know the premise of it. I will say that it's a questionable marketing slogan to put the face of Darkseid on the front cover of the book, given that the entire thing is a mystery for the majority of it. But the cover of the trade collection has Darkseid's head on it. But we are looking at it on DC Universe, the DC Universe app, the best value in comics alongside Marvel Unlimited. Get yourself an account. I had quite a good time reading this on that app, actually. Very intuitive. And let's give you a little backstory on this before we get into our review. The Great Darkness Saga, and I'm reading in full disclosure here, right off of the Wikipedia page. The Great Darkness Saga is a 5-issue American comic book story arc featuring the Legion of Superheroes, written by Paul Levitz, who I know primarily from his years as an editor and publisher at DC Comics. Editor-in-chief for a while, I believe. Had a great tenure in that role. Did a lot for creator rights. Anyway, with art by Keith Giffen and Larry Malstead. Of course, Keith Giffen, well known for his tenure as a storyteller. Right, my God, and apparently somebody's house is burning down or something outside. I'll just wait for the siren to go by. Oh my Lord! Sorry, folks. This is just the area that I live in here in lush and serene Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, in Ho-Ho-Loon Plaza in the L-shaped studio, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
So, Giffen, of course, is most well known as a storyteller, artist and writer from Justice League International, Justice League of America. I mean, just countless stories over the years. He's done so much work, it's impossible to keep track of it all. This was published by DC Comics in 1982 in Legion of Superheroes Volume 2, numbers 290 through 294. It features, we'll get into this very quickly, it features appearances by virtually every living past and present Legionnaire as of 1982, as well as most of the team's 30th century allies, including the Legion of Substitute Heroes, the Wanderers, the Heroes of Lalor, and the 20th century Kryptonian refugee Dev M. Whew. Anyway, Great Darkness Saga, 1982, Nick. So we have to go back in time to a simpler era of comics. We were still on the very tail end of the Silver/Bronze Age, really Bronze Age DC, I guess you would say here. So comics are kind of in that in-between phase where they're still primarily targeting kids, but they're getting a little more mature in their storytelling. They're not quite to the level they would reach years later in the 80s, aiming at an older audience. So they're kind of in that serving two different masters mold right here. They're still trying to be simple enough for kids to understand, but trying to work in some soap opera dynamics between the characters and things of that nature. All right, so before we get cracking really hardcore into our review here, Nick, what is your knowledge of the Legion of Superheroes? Did you do any research before this story?
No. I know that they're in the future. I know that they often have an association with Superman and or Superboy and or Supergirl.
Yes.
And I know that they have lots of characters with let's just be honest here, folks. The names of these characters are a massive barrier for me. With the understanding that names in comics are generally cheesy, I get that. But my God, every character is, a boy or a lad or a lass or a girl or and it's just, the names are not the most inventive things, and they kind of come off as, well, stupid. it's the best way I can put it. And so, other than knowing that they were from the future, there were lots of time travel shenanigans and stupid names. That's all I had.
Well, Nick, let's get right into that. With the names thing, because we talked about this a little bit offline. I will admit to you that the names can be a barrier for people. I can understand. I think that's reasonable. That's understandable. Certainly, comic books are littered with corny names for characters all over
Absolutely.
the place. Down to their Batman, Spider-Man, Superman.
Right.
Repetitive, not super creative names at all. However, it's more of an issue when you have a team of hundreds, seemingly, of characters, at least dozens of characters, and an overwhelming percentage of them have similar sounding names or similar names. So I'll give you an example of some of these issues that I ran into, because my issue was less the names themselves, like Cosmic Boy. That's fine for a comic book name. The problem, though, is when you have Cosmic Boy and Sun Boy and Bouncing Boy and who else is there?
Element Lad and Lightning
Lad,
Saturn Girl and Dream Girl and so on and so forth.
Colossal Boy, Chameleon Boy,
Duo Damsel,
Star Boy.
Star Boy.
I already said Bouncing Boy, Ultra Boy, Matter.
You're just gonna work in every excuse to work in Bouncing Boy.
I love Bouncing Boy. We'll get on that. Matter Eater Lad.
He was in like 4 panels.
Well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about those 4 panels in depth. Matter Eater Lad, Element Lad, Lightning Lass, Dream Girl, Pharaoh Lad, Karate Kid, Princess Projectra. That's actually creative. I'll give him that one. Shadow Lass.
What are her powers? Princess Projectra.
It says that she has the generation of illusions. Also control over all 5 senses of herself and others, and some
Don't we all?
vision.
Oh, and others. Okay, that's what I was. Don't we all have?
Now,
control over
what you
our
find is once they get to the Bronze Age, the names of these characters start to improve a little bit. You get Timberwolf at the end of the 60s. That's a decent name. You get Wildfire, Tyrock, Dawnstar, Block. These are individual names, at least. Even if they're not the best names, they're individual names. Then you go back to Invisible Kid 2, who is our beloved Jacques Faucart.
Oh, God.
We're going to talk about him a lot, I'm sure. You get White Witch, which is a good name. You get then you get Magnetic Kid. That's not amazing. Or Polar Boy. But Quizlet and Tellus, who are not in this story. But no, the point we're getting at here is I understand where Nick's coming from on this. That when you're trying to read a story and everybody is something boy, something lad, something lass, it's odd. And especially lad and lass, which are such dated terms.
Yes.
That to think that people would still be using them in the 30th century is something else. So I think that's fair. That we're being, and before anybody turns off the podcast in anger, before anybody gets ready to get their pitchforks on social media, we're trying to be as honest as we can in our review. And I will have good things to say later, and we will get to those. So the names, bit of a problem here. What about the other aspects here, the sheer number of characters? Was that a problem as well for you, Nick?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's no way around. We come in. This starts in what, Greg? Issue 190, I believe. Is that
290?
290, yeah.
290 of Volume 2.
Yeah, we're hundreds of issues into the story, so obviously it's not going to be taking time to set up and introduce all these characters. We're kind of joining these characters, in midstream, and luckily, and we talked about this earlier, in a lot of comics, this would be annoying to me. In maybe an Avengers or a Justice League title where I know all these characters, every character, when they speak to another character, addresses them by their full title. So, like, if Lightning Lad is saying something to Element Lad, he'll say, "Well, Element Lad," and then he'll say something, and then Element Lad will respond, "Well, yes, Lightning Lad," but, and then they'll do that, which it's really annoying, but it helped me to keep track of who all these characters were, because the other thing about this is it's not, the Avengers book that we got kind of caught shit for introduced a ton of characters and then gradually over the course of that story kind of pared down to focus on just a few. Here, we will get like a scene with a character, and then you may not have another scene until a couple issues later. It doesn't really pare down the focus. If anything, the focus continually expands as you go on, as they introduce more and more characters near the end. So, luckily they were able to help me to keep track of who these characters were. But I will say, while I was able to keep track of who they were technically, in many cases it was there wasn't much differentiation between the personalities, which made characters who did have differentiation in personalities, namely Element Lad, I think, and others, stand out even more.
Yes, all of that I would echo. The number of characters would be so intimidating without this, because I'm the same way. I've always been bothered in comics when I read it and everybody is like, "Hello, Batman. Hello, Superman. Hey, there's Hawkman. Hey, Aquaman. What are you doing over there?" Stuff like that, But a book like this makes me realize why that kind of stuff is necessary. For somebody that's reading a comic for the first time that doesn't know these characters, it was a way, and I know that Larry Hama famously had this rule on his G.I. Joe comic in the 80s. Every time a character appears for the first time, they should be called by their name. And this helped me a lot in this story to actually start to identify with these characters. Now, there are so many that it's inevitable that many of them will run together in your head. That happened with me. Many of them ran together in my head. But there were some that stood out. And they wouldn't have stood out if I didn't have them being called by their names constantly. In fact, one of the few times in this book that I found myself getting confused is when they would refer to each other by their real names instead of their code names. Like, there's a couple of times when they're referring to themselves by their first names, and I'm like, who? Who's Jim with a G? I don't know that guy. And then luckily a few pages later he's referred to as Colossal Boy. And so I think that's Colossal Boy anyway. Don't shoot me if I've got the wrong boy. But I guess I could just research that right now since I got to play. Yeah, he's Jim Allen. So I was like, who the hell is Jim with a G? That's weird. Then I found out a few pages later. But yeah, it can be. That was the only time I found myself getting really confused. Was, my God, wait a minute. Who is that? Who is this person's real name and instead of their gimmick name, basically? So that can get overwhelming when you're dealing with this many characters. And also backing up and piggybacking off of something you just said, it's a little bit of a different approach than I'm used to reading more modern comics. There is that tendency in modern comics to, even if you're doing a team book, have the story really have a central character or group of characters that it's focusing on. I think back to the Jeff Johns Justice League run where Darkseid War was very much a Wonder Woman arc told from her perspective. Maybe the Throne of Atlantis arc, of course, was an Aquaman story, kind of told from his perspective. And this is a different approach. This is a story that starts small and builds big, big, big as it goes along. Escalating stakes, escalating numbers, and it's kind of a novel approach to me. I kind of appreciated seeing this different take on how you do that, where they managed to bring in all of these different areas of the Legion of Superheroes that I knew nothing about. Like, I don't know what the Legion of Substitute Heroes are. I don't know what the Heroes of Lalor are, but they bring
And
them.
I still don't, for the record.
I don't
know what the Heroes of Lalor are.
No, I still.
At least the Legion of Substitute Heroes, I can kind of use the context clues to work that one out.
Well, they substitute in, I assume, when needed. But or the Wanderers. I don't know who the Wanderers are, but they just bring them in, and it's like, gosh, there's so many of these different characters. But it did add to a sense of bigness, for lack of a better word there. I'll just create one. The bigness of the story, the size of the story, the scope of the story felt enormous as a result of bringing in all these characters, in my opinion.
Yeah, the scope felt big as a result of all the characters, but I would argue the scope, to me anyway, felt large, not just because of all these characters, but primarily because of the threat they were facing and the way the threat was built. And I have more to offer on that topic, I think, whenever we get there.
Yeah. So the premise of this story, I guess, and I'm not going to go beat by beat because, people should read the story on their own. But, the premise is you pick it up as the Legion is seemingly investigating a normal run-of-the-mill situation, and they get attacked and besieged by these creatures, these darkness creatures coming out of these voids that appear out of nowhere, and they're stealing mystical objects throughout the universe that have a great amount of power to them. They steal this magic wand. They steal an orb of some kind that has great power in it. They pop out of nowhere, and they all seem to be slightly familiar, even though they're in the distant future. People seem to have a reaction to them where they're like, I feel like I have encountered this person before, even though they're not even people. They're dark shells of people, and they all have different abilities as they come after the heroes. And there is a mysterious figure commanding these creatures. They refer to him only as Master, the Lord of Darkness. And they're coming in, and they're popping up, and they're just laying waste to the Legion. The Legion starts this story with a supreme amount of confidence, and the characters like Wildfire is one of those characters you mentioned, Nick, that stands out. He's a guy that's got a very strong, fiery, hot Irish temper, and has a strong personality. He's a little arrogant, has a name that isn't Fireboy, and he's
Fire Lad.
He stands out,
Flame Lad,
as a result, and so he's got a very strong, arrogant, haughty personality, and he gets put on his ass right in the beginning of this story, as does Superboy. Which kind of another thing I appreciated is Superboy's here at the beginning, and a way that Paul Levitz and Keith Giffen immediately lay out the stakes of this story is to have your most powerful member of Superboy, and from what is talked about as being one of their most powerful members in Wildfire, instantly laid waste in the first action scene in the book. So, meanwhile, as all this is going on, the basic premise of this is the Legion's trying to figure out who these creatures are, who their master is, and what he wants. While that's going on, there's various subplots going on in a very kind of Chris Claremontian soap opera aspect. You've got various romantic entanglements with a number of characters, and don't ask me to recite to you the romances going on, because I couldn't begin to get them all right. But you've got various characters that are in relationships with one another, but might be lusting after other members of the team. I know Timberwolf is involved in a what seems to be a controversial spat with what is it, Saturn Girl, I believe, or I don't know, one of them.
Your guess is as good as mine, sir.
And anyway, while all these romantic entanglements are going on, there's also a new leader needed for the Legion, because Lightning Lad has just resigned and also been rendered comatose, and that's part of the mystery that's unfolding over the course of the story as well. And so in Lightning Lad's absence, they need to, and this is, again, I didn't know how this worked, Nick, because I've never read a Legion story, but it's kind of interesting as well. They put the leadership up for the vote. It's not like the X-Men where Xavier kind of picks who the leader is, or the Justice League where there really is no leader technically. In this case, the Legion actually votes on who the leader of the Legion is and will obey that person no matter what they say, basically. So in this case, we get an election featuring 3 different individuals running. I believe it's Ultra Boy, Element Lad most notably, and Dream Girl. And I really think, Nick, that this subplot of the election actually is essential to this book, to making it feel like a more complete and satisfying read, because it was refreshing to see these, as we've talked about, cornily named characters, cheesily named characters that seem to be relics of the Silver Age have flawed personalities. Because in particular, all 3 of them really, not just Element Lad, he's the one that stands out in my mind, but all 3 of them in the early parts of this story are at times not ignoring their heroic duties, but in the midst of their heroic duties are politicking to get this leadership position, and doing it in a pretty annoying and asshole-ish fashion. Particularly, I can't remember the mission that they're on early in the story. Element Lad is kind of trying to protect some people, and he turns at one point to the rest of his team and says, "Keep this mission in mind when it comes time to vote for the new leader." And then I think it's Starboy says, "Shut the hell up! Shut your ass up!" And then you've got and then Dream Girl walks in the room at one point and just says, "Why even have an election? It's ordained that I'm going to win. You know I'm going to be the new leader." So she's acting holier than thou to everybody. Ultra Boy is the only one that handles it kind of well, and even he is like, "I'm throwing my name in the hat, and if anybody's smart, they'll vote for me." So you've got all these strong personalities that are not just generic Silver Age superheroes. Does that make sense, Nick?
Yeah, for the most part. Again, because I think you have a few who have very distinct personalities, but then just because of the number of characters featured here, there's not really enough real estate to give every single character a moment to showcase their own unique personality.
Right, but I think in this case, that election element gave them a chance to give these characters, and I think that's why they stood out. They stood out more in my mind, those 3. And in particular, I halfway kept expecting Dream Girl to turn heel on the team as the story played out, because of all the hints that Darkseid had an inside player, so to speak. Anyway, I appreciated that subplot that goes on throughout. And of course, the eventual reveal here in this story is that the Lord of Darkness, the master of these husks, so to speak, is Darkseid, who has been, as we learn, asleep for 1,000 years, a millennium, and has reawakened and been reborn, so to speak, and is absorbing power throughout the cosmos. And he has created these shadow figures in the mold of heroes from the 20th century, where he's originally from. So there is a Superman knockoff here. There is a Guardian of the Universe knockoff, an Owen, who is here, which I thought was kind of cool. There is a Dream Girl's ancestor is cloned here in sort of a dark, twisted version. And perhaps the most ironic of all, and the one clue that I think, as I was trying to read this story, Nick, through the eyes of someone that didn't know the twist was coming, if that makes sense. It's hard to do because we know the twist is coming, so there's no real way to recreate it. But I was trying to, follow the mystery and follow the clues along to see if it made sense. And the one that really kind of would have tipped me off, I think, was the guy that shows up with Orion's hover thing, whatever it is, a hover bike or whatever it is. When he shows up, it's like, okay, that looks like Orion. So that's where the seeds are really being planted, that this is tied to the new gods and to Apocalypse. And when you extrapolate from there, some of the comments that are made about Kryptonians and things of that nature, when the reveal finally happens, it's I think it's one of the examples of a great comic book reveal, Nick, because it's a great twist, but it's a twist that makes perfect sense. It's almost not a twist. It's been built to, and it makes absolute sense. If you follow the clues, the breadcrumbs from the beginning, everything adds up. It's not one of those twists or turns out of left field. Really appreciated the way that this story built to it, and I think that's kind of where I'm going at with this part of the review is the interesting part about this story to me was less the Legion of Superheroes and more the villain.
Yeah, and that really brings me to my main thoughts on the entire story. I wound up enjoying this story overall. I'll go ahead and say that. But I can't say that it makes me want to run out and read more Legion of Superheroes. What it makes me want to do is read more Darkseid. It reached a point about midway through the book where I was actively hoping that the Legion scenes would end so we could move on to the next Darkseid scene. Yeah. Not because they were necessarily bad, but because the Darkseid stuff was infinitely more interesting to me than these Legion characters who, again, with the exception of a handful, kind of started to run together.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair. I probably enjoyed the Legion stuff more than you did, but this was a Darkseid story to me at the end of the day. This was
right.
And I say that even though Darkseid is not technically revealed as a character until issue 4, right? And so, or the end of issue 3.
Didn't they show him to us at the end of issue 1?
No, I don't think so.
I
could be wrong on that. You can pull it up and double check my work on that one, but I'm pretty sure that he doesn't actually get revealed as the villain until the end of issue 3. But he's there talking. It's just he's bathed in shadow, or he's got energy, surrounding him, or what have you. Like he Kirby dots everywhere, of course, which is a nice touch, I thought. And so when the reveal comes and you see that he's in a pretty tremendous evil scheme, he has swapped Daxam with Apocalypse. So now Daxam is the new Apocalypse, and it's literally shaped in the image of his head, which is tremendous. It's a great reveal. And to your point, Nick, even in those early issues when he's just an anonymous evil figure, he's just so compelling. Every time he does or says anything, he is the embodiment of evil, which I think Darkseid should be. We talked about that on the show before, that our favorite villains tend to be those tragic, tortured villains that have this complex backstory, and you can almost sympathize with them in a way, maybe not empathize, but sympathize with them in a way at times. And then there are exceptions to that rule, Nick. And in this case, I don't want any of that from Darkseid. I want Darkseid to be completely unsympathetic. I want Darkseid to be cartoonishly evil. Just as I put it to you on the phone today, off air, I want him to be Mr. McMahon in the form of a new god. And that's pretty much what Darkseid is in this story. Paul Levitz writes, Nick, what maybe... he's up there as my favorite Darkseid that I've ever read, because this dude is so haughty and so arrogant and so full of himself and just such a dick the entire course of this story. This is a guy who, even when he's being beaten down at the end of the book, Darkseid is still arrogant. He still can't even fathom the very possibility that a mortal could ever challenge him. He is so convinced of his destiny, of his superiority over every living creature, that it's just an inevitability. It's a little bit, Nick, like Thanos was in the Avengers movies, except even more so because Thanos had an attempt at a sympathetic backstory. Darkseid is just evil for the sake of evil. He loves pain. He loves suffering. He loves torturing heroes, and primarily he just enjoys having a lot of power. And who can blame him, really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's this is an outstanding portrayal of Darkseid. It's an outstanding way to do this over the top villain. You and I have both, as you said, spoken about our preference for the sympathetic villain, but there's definitely room for a villain of this ilk, and this is if you're gonna do it, this is a great way to do it. Like I said earlier, to the point where he becomes fairly early on much more compelling to me than the heroes around him.
My favorite exchange in the entire story, I actually saved this image on my phone because it made me laugh out loud when I was reading it the other night. Shadow Lass is trying to hide this mystery baby that ends up turning the tide in the war in her world of shadow that she creates. And Darkseid is talking to her. You don't think that you can hide from me within darkness, do you? And she says, "It worked against your murder machines. Maybe it'll stop you too. And if not, what'll you do? You can't kill me more than once anyway." And Darkseid's response, "In all my millennia, I have not heard such presumption." The idea that he can't kill her multiple times offends him to his core. Which reminds me of that classic panel that we actually posted in the column all those years back of he's sad that he has to bring Calabac back to life.
What he does just to murder him again.
Yeah. I mean, this is just an amazing character. Just an amazing character. One of Jack Kirby's greatest creations. And I think that's one of the things that comes through in this story is it's a love letter to Jack Kirby. There's Kirby dots everywhere. There's big ideas everywhere. Darkseid, Orion having that fist fight at the end of the book, which is awesome. Highfather shows up. Hightower and Mahoney from Police Academy show up. It's just it's a who's who throughout this this book. And I felt like, for me anyway, I felt the story really picked up. I mean, it was good the whole way. It was a good mystery they were building, but I ended up really enjoying this, and I thought that last issue was really good.
Yeah, the last issue once we got full on Darkseid pretty much all the way throughout was much better. I will agree.
So let's talk about the art here. Keith Giffen. I've not experienced a ton of Keith Giffen on pencils. I certainly have before at times with something like I think he did not Larfleeze, but that series that was sort of setting up Larfleeze before that, and I can't remember the name of it. I've only encountered his pencils a few times. I know he's got two wildly different styles as his career has advanced. I'm mainly familiar with him as a writer. What did you make of the art here from Keith Giffen?
It was pretty good. Especially when it came to the action sequences. When it was some of the quieter moments, really the only thing that was differentiating the male characters in particular to me were, with the exception of Bouncing Boy, of course, who I'm sure you'll talk about, was hair color, because I think a lot of the facial structures were pretty much the same, which kind of lent itself to this feeling of sameness. But for the most part, it was, like I said, especially in terms of the action, pretty good art here.
Well, the other one is that stood out of the men was Starboy, because he looks like legendary NFL quarterback Dan Fouts.
You said that earlier, and I didn't see it, but fair enough.
You don't see that Starboy with the beard looked like Dan Fouts? I'm gonna look at it right now. Starboy, Dan Fouts, to see if anybody else has ever put this together. God dang it, no one has. Still, we're gonna look at Starboy's beard. And it didn't pull up anything. What the hell? What are we doing? What is society doing right now that nobody has thought that Starboy, until me, looked like Dan Fouts. Anyway, am I even referring to the right character, by the way? Is it Starboy or Cosmic Boy I'm referring to?
I have no idea.
Hell if I know.
Your guess is as good as mine.
In any event, so my only problem with the art in this, but I thought it was good for the most part, even very good at times, particularly the dark side stuff. There are a couple of times where it was hard for me to tell what was going on. Primarily, if there's a lot going on in the background, some of the action scenes, they would be great. I love you mentioned it. A lot of these action scenes are amazing, but there are some action scenes here where the events as they transpired didn't make a ton of sense to me. How characters end up in different positions. Sometimes most of the time it did, but there were some where it was like, man, it's hard to tell. Even in the last issue during the Orion and Darkseid fight, there's one of the moments that happens, and I'm like, whoa, I couldn't tell who was being hit by who. I was like, but nonetheless, interesting. It's just interesting to see Keith Giffen on art. But overall, he did a good job. I thought the inks were good. The colors were certainly good in this one. But I don't know. I would be interested to see other, predominant Legion artists and who is considered the best Legion artist. I don't even know. It's not one of those deals like with X-Men where you got John Byrne or Jim Lee fans, or maybe it is like that. I don't know. Maybe there are camps for Keith Giffen or camps for some other guy. I don't know. So kind of wrapping things up here, I think what I've been building to and what I kind of realized, Nick, and I think we're a little bit different on this, because you mentioned that you thought you enjoyed it overall. Thought it was I don't know, how would you classify it?
I would say if we're grading it, I'll give it a solid. I'll give it a B to a B plus.
Yeah, so we're not that far off. I mean, but I really like this story. I was not expecting to like it. In full disclosure, again, coming into this story, I thought that it would be confusing. I thought that it would leave me cold in the way that Busiek Avengers story did. However, I realized also reading the story, and I talked to you about this the other day, I gave it a couple of concessions that I wasn't willing to give the Busiek Avengers book, which came out, I believe, somewhere around the neighborhood of 17 years after this story. So the kind of dated, stilted dialogue that I thought happened in that book, I was less patient for because it was 1999 than I was in a 1982 comic book, where it's kind of more expected for me. I thought this book did a better job, certainly, of presenting its villain and its overall premise. It seemed to have a point. There was one central point to the story, which I thought was refreshing to that first collected volume of Avengers. And I know they're going for different things, but I just really enjoyed this story. I thought it was fun. I thought it flowed nicely. It didn't take me long to read it at all. I think I read this in total on the course of 4 nights, which is speedy for me. Not the entire night reading it, obviously, but reading it in sessions. Monday night during Raw, I pretty much read the entire second or third and fourth issue, and then the final issue I read during SmackDown. So it was an easy read for me, a breezy read, and I gotta say, for a first Legion story, this was pretty damn good. I'm not sure that it's gonna, like you said, Nick, convince me to go out and hunt down a bunch of other Legion stories, but certainly I'm no longer going to turn my nose up and run away in the other direction of a Legion story if it looks good. So maybe what Brian Bendis is doing right now, Jeff Johns stories, maybe I'll have to revisit some of those and see if they work for me a little bit better now that I have an idea of the basis and the foundation of the Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah, I mean, Bendis would certainly be one of the things that could get me to check it out. But again, my enjoyment of this story came primarily from the dark side stuff. This does not fill me with any great desire to go out and read the ongoing adventures of Element Lad and Saturn Girl and Dream Girl and the like.
I didn't even get a chance yet. I wanted to follow through on this promise because I talked about Bouncing Boy, and I thought during the course of reading this story, Nick, that I found my spirit superhero. And he's an individual whose ability appears to be, well, he's fat! He's so fat, in fact, that he can bounce around like a ball all over the place. Hence his name, Bouncing Boy. And I thought to myself, if ever there was a superhero who embodied the Greg Phillips ideal, is it not Bouncing Boy? Your thoughts, Nick?
Sure. You kept saying that there was this panel near the end that would just remind me of you, and I didn't see it.
Oh, that was the Brainiac 5 panel where he's talking to
yes.
Supergirl at the very end of the.
Oh yes. Now I thought you meant for some reason I thought you meant a Bouncing Boy panel.
No. I changed it. I mentioned that there was a Brainiac 5 panel at the end that was a total me moment, and it was the last I think the last scene in the book actually, which was a really good scene actually. I really liked that one. Brainiac 5 is talking to Supergirl, and apparently in past years he had harbored a crush over her that caused him to act awkward and fumble around her. But now he's gotten past it. And he tells her this. He's like, I think the reason that I'm more calm now and settled down is I think I finally got over my crush for you. To which she responds, that's a shame. I was just starting to think how cute you are. And flies off. Leaving Brainiac 5 to feel like an idiot. And haven't we all been there?
I suppose we have.
In any event, we're going to wrap up our review now. Hit us up with your thoughts on the Great Darkness Saga. On Twitter, I am gphillips8652. He is Nick Duke 87. You can join the.
I'm fully anticipating getting blown up by Mitch Oken here in the coming days.
And we welcome it, in fact. And you can also tweet at JRSBBQ. And Place to Be Nation Comics on Facebook. Join that page and let us know your thoughts on Great Darkness Saga and on our thoughts on the Great Darkness Saga. I was unexpectedly impressed. Nick was slightly impressed. And but we'll let you know our thoughts more in detail if you want to know more about our viewing of this book. And again, go out and get the DC Universe app. It's great. I had no issues with it. It flowed I did the panel to panel view on my phone, which is not the ideal way to read a comic book, but it worked great in this instance. So
God, just be glad it wasn't drawn by George Perez, or else Todd would have a conniption that you were reading it on your phone.
Well, it's not. I mean, there's no question this is not the ideal way to read comics. I don't like reading comics on my phone, but in this case, it was more of a necessity thing. I was out of town over the weekend. I tell you, the way that I prefer to read this, I read the first issue, half of it, on my TV, and that was really cool. So I would recommend folks to give that a shot if they haven't done it. So anyway, we're going to take a break, and when we come back on the other side, we will have reading. Actually, we probably won't have that, but we will have the rundown.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Place to Be Nations, JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have over 24 podcasts available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We now offer them to you on two great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation Wrestling feed, we dive into topics running the gamut from today's WWE to the glory days of yesteryear and the ins and outs of the territory days. In addition to our full-length shows, we also deliver to you special pod blasts on topics old and new.
The Place to Be Nation Pop feed is a veritable treasure trove of great content. Offer tremendous shows covering the land of movies, television, life, comics, and sports, brought to you by the most knowledgeable and insightful folks in the podcast world.
You can find all these great shows, plus archives of our past podcasts from over the past 8 years as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while you're there, be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All of these shows, plus others, available on PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth search projects, and much more. Be sure to support our site by using www.PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping. We want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar, ProWrestlingOnly.com, and TheHistoryOfWrestling.com as well. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen, and we've got the rest of the show. So let's get right into it and tell you about all the great things that are happening right here at Place to Be Nation Pop. Pop music. First off, check out our weekly shows. The Hard Traveling Fanboys, that's us. We attempted last week to fix the terrible 2005 film Elektra. Can it be done? Find out and fix it or nix it. Yeah, thanks, Nick.
No, it can't.
Spoiler alert. DC4U wraps up... Let me rephrase that. DC4U wraps up September. Easy for me to say, with the new current events looking at all the big DC Comics, TV, and movie news for the month, as well as picking their top DC books for the month. This week in the NFL hits weekly as well, with Roger and Johnny recapping the last set of games and previewing the upcoming weekend's batch. Charlie Batch, that is. A brand new show joins the Pop feed as siblings Kevin and Mary host the Brother Sister Rewatch podcast. On episode 17, they bring you The Office, season 3, episodes 5 and 6. Pop goes the movies when Scott and Jennifer review the
Pop go to movies because the movies go pop.
highly anticipated sequel to Stephen King's It. It Chapter 2 is the name of the film. On Laugh In Theater number 11, Andy welcomes Jason Sherman to live. God dang it. On Laugh In Theater number 11, Andy welcomes Jason Sherman to live watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. There, I did it. On Looking Forward, Looking Back. It's the summer movie recap and wager results. Andy is joined by Miranda, Scott, Tim, and Russell to see who won. Well, the greatest song of the 80s tournament continues. We're in the regional finals round, a.k.a. the Sweet 16. There will be 2 polls a day posted for round 6. You can get in on the action on Facebook by searching PTBN's greatest song of the 80s tournament and liking the page. Be sure to weigh in. And I would just like to say for the record that Africa by Toto being eliminated from this tournament offends me.
So you think it should have won the tournament?
Yes. As has been well established, Africa by Toto is my jam.
Mm.
Would you disagree that it should have won the tournament?
I would.
Well,
this entire exercise has been flawed from the get-go, though. I mean, with virtually no country songs to speak of. No, in the 1980s, Greg, you mean to tell me there wasn't not a one George Strait song among the top 787 songs?
I nominated plenty of George Strait songs. They got poo-pooed.
My point is when you start from a flawed and biased perspective, you will get flawed and biased results. And here we are.
I can't argue with that. That's actually a good point, Nick. A rare good point from Nick Duke, I have to admit. Well, meanwhile, tell us, I guess I should say this. With the greatest song of the 80s tournament winding down, we will soon be announcing our fall tournament, so stay tuned.
Boy.
Over at the PTBN Wrestling feed, Nick, what's going on down yonder?
Well, Wrestling Warzone is back with episode 30 featuring WCW Clash of the Champions 32. On the 5th episode of the Extreme 3-Way Dance, JT, Jenny, and John danced their way through 3 episodes of ECW Hardcore TV from March and April of 1994. Main event number 133 previews WWE's Clash of Champions, then goes back to 2002 for the next TNA Classic pay-per-view recap. Be sure to check out PTBN's Clash of Champions reaction show with Chris Zellner and Devin Hales. Peter Wenson and Steve Bennett wrap up their series breaking down their favorite all-time sports season on the Adams division, which can of course be found on the wrestling feed. Jenny, Matt, Drew, and Scott dip into their hidden gems to review Boogie Jam 84 on Jenny and the Gems. Every Wednesday on PlaceToBeNation.com, we've got the most interesting and unexpectedly funny stories on the World Wide Walk in Glenn's on the World Wide Web in Glenn's Weekly Walk. And for college football fans, Greg, Scott Criscolo and Logan Crossland have their weekly campus hot takes, looking back at the previous week and looking ahead to the biggest matchups. Catch their weekly column every Tuesday afternoon. I must have missed that column this past Tuesday, which is odd. And if you're doing some online shopping over at Amazon.com, be sure to click on the Amazon banner on the right side of the Place to Be Nation homepage, or use PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon. And it takes you right to Amazon and helps P2BN out with no cost to you. And anyway, check out our social media pages and message board at www.bigelow34.proboards.com for information on joining our GWWE, PPV, and TV Match Ever project. Get in on the conversation today and start researching your list.
Amazingly done, Nick.
Thank you.
Well, now it's time for our weekly look at the PN news and notes in the world of comics. It's a segment known in some circles as a rundown.
Welcome
Well, gosh, Nick, a lot of moving parts here on the rundown this week. A lot of things to talk about, but I think the biggest story of the week in our circles, anyway, is the official announcement of something that we've been speculating about and hoping for quite some time. Yes, after much ballyhoo, Tom Welling and Erica Durance are official for the Crisis on Infinite Earths television crossover event on the CW, and they will be reprising their roles as Clark Kent and Lois Lane, respectively, from the television show Smallville. Smallville laid the foundations for what was done years later with the Arrowverse. Obviously, they're separate universes, but with the multiverse collapsing in Crisis, we're going to get to find out, according to the creators of the show, Guggenheim, Berlanti, etc., we're going to find out what Smallville's version of Lois and Clark have been up to in the almost 10 years since Smallville went off the air. What happens to them after he becomes Superman in that story? So this is exciting, man. For those of us that were longtime Smallville fans, we never really got to see Tom Welling as Superman until the very last episode, and even then only briefly. So this is going to be really cool. Erica Durance is an amazing Lois. They have amazing chemistry. Hopefully they can recapture that. And the most exciting thing, Nick, is this is not going to be a one-off. It's not going to be a simple cameo. Apparently, according to the article, they're going to be in multiple episodes of this crossover. So exciting news for sure.
This is exciting. I know it's probably even more exciting for someone like yourself who was a massive Smallville fan, but even someone like me who is something of a Smallville. I don't know. I won't say I hate Smallville. It was never my cup of tea, and my attempts to get into it in subsequent years have failed due in large part to the what I would consider a pretty bad season 1, honestly. But I'm excited that other people are excited. How about that?
Very good. And one thing that I know you're also excited about is more Mia Smoke coming to the Arrowverse.
Ooh, lordy.
That's because CW is developing an Arrow spinoff set in the future of Star City, which focuses on Mia Smoke taking up the mantle of the Green Arrow alongside Laurel Lance and Dinah Drake. The show will feature actors Catherine McNamara, the aforementioned Mia Smoke, Katie Cassidy's Laurel, and Juliana Harkavay's Dinah as the stars of this show. No title yet. I think Star City 2040 is a name that we had bandied about on the show last year because it was the name of an episode, I think. And nobody's really sure what the title's going to be, or villains or anything like that. But it's going to happen. It's official. You would have to assume that Connor Hawke will be on there as well after the great chemistry that those two characters showed. This is pretty exciting, Nick. I know we talked about the different possible spinoffs. We were hoping for a Green Lantern spinoff. Knew that was a long shot, but if it wasn't going to be that, and if it wasn't going to be the Manu Bennett Deathstroke show, I think this is about as good as it was going to get. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah, at the very least, it'll give us more Mia Smoke, as you said, which I know, in all seriousness, she's been a great character thus far during her appearances. It'll also give us an opportunity to continue to see older versions of our beloved Arrow characters. I'm fully expecting an older John Diggle to appear at some point. I'm expecting, other characters from throughout the Arrowverse to be able to appear as their aged up counterparts. This opens a lot of really interesting doors, and I'm going to stand by I'm predicting that I feel like Oliver's going to pull the Crisis on Infinite Earths and go into a pocket dimension at the end of this crisis. He's going to basically fill the role of the Earth 2 Superman and go off with Felicity to a pocket dimension. And so a couple years down the road, whenever it would feel big and important, there's always that opportunity to have this big reunion between Ollie and Mia at some point. So, very, very excited.
Totally good news here. And, obviously it's just around the corner, so we're not going to have to wait that much longer to see it happen, just a couple months off from the crossover. Well, the long talked about the Batman movie is making moves this week, as we now supposedly have our Commissioner Gordon picked out, and another actor that I'll get to in a moment. So it looks like they're in conversations right now with Jeffrey Wright, veteran actor, to portray Commissioner Gordon. Jeffrey Wright is probably known to a lot of people as Felix Leiter in the Daniel Craig James Bond movies. I believe he was in Quantum of Solace, notably, and excellent in that movie. I love this actor. I always have. He would also be our first black Commissioner Gordon. So, but I'm a big Jeffrey Wright fan. I think he's been underutilized. I think he should have been in all the most recent Bond movies. Thankfully, they're bringing him back finally for the new one, I think. So, what are your thoughts on Jeffrey Wright? Is he a good Commissioner Gordon pick?
This is awesome. This is an awesome pick. It didn't even occur to me they might race swap it, but if they're going to do it, this guy has kind of that older look that I think you would want, and has been great in what I've seen him in. So yeah, I'm all for this.
And he does a great job of portraying someone who's just had enough. By God,
right?
And Gordon should have that element to him. So with that,
now, why don't you tell us about this other casting?
I'd rather just move on, Nick.
How about we don't?
Well, there's no character attached yet, but apparently the studio is in discussions for the Batman movie with Jonah Hill.
Oh, wait. Put some respect on the name. Academy Award nominated actor Jonah Hill.
I will give him the amount of respect that the guy from Superbad deserves. Jonah Hill. No, this is a story that we included because Nick likes picking at me because I've always disliked Jonah Hill the same way that he dislikes Channing Tatum for unreasonable reasons. Sometimes you just don't like actors, and I don't like Jonah Hill. I didn't like his movies when I was in college, and it tainted him for me. And I have not seen Wolf of Wall Street. I'm sure it's a good film. I'm sure he does fine in it. I've not even seen Moneyball.
Moneyball's pretty good, yeah.
However, I've seen Superbad. I've seen Knocked Up, isn't he in that too?
Knocked Up. Yeah, he's one of the.
He's the worst part
of
it.
Rogen's
I love
friends.
Knocked Up, but he's the worst part of that movie. I've seen several of his other comedies. Didn't he do that one with, or was that just Seth Rogen? He may not have been in that one where Seth Rogen and James Franco love weed.
Oh, Pineapple Express.
Oh, yeah.
I think he may have had a cameo, but like I didn't like that movie either.
So, anyway, I don't know. There's talk that obviously the conjecture, because he's chunky, is that he's going to play the Penguin. And that would be fine with me, Nick, believe it or not. Do you know why it would be fine with me?
Because you also hate the Penguin.
That's right. I am not a Cobblepottian. I don't like Cobblepot. I don't find him amusing. I find him annoying.
I of course want him to play Bane and want him to play. I want him to channel his earlier films, his Superbad era films, and play Bane in that vein, just so you can have a little taste, Greg, of what it feels like.
Oh, so he'd pretty much be just like all of the other adaptations of Bane that have been done, other than Christopher Nolan's.
No. He would be playing a comedic, over-the-top version of Bane.
So like Jeep Swenson's Bane?
Who cuts like one-liners and has goofy jokes to tell and stuff.
Couldn't be worse than what we've gotten. Nobody does Bane right. All right. Other than
except for Christopher Nolan, as you just said.
Yes, Christopher Nolan did it.
How many do we have to get for it to count?
More than one.
More than one.
More than one. Even the animated series didn't do Bane properly, in my opinion. And they did everybody properly. They did characters better than they were done in the comics. Well, speaking of Batman, though, that's not the end of the news. Believe it or not. We have to go on to the printed page, Nick. Ready for this?
Yeah, we're going to skip over this other story, but yes.
What other story?
In the rundown that I sent you that's immediately following the Batman casting?
Oh, yeah, never mind. We'll do that. Yeah, Ghost Rider. They were going to do a show on Hulu. They're not doing a show now on Hulu. It's been canceled before it was ever made. How will we recover?
You hate having things called to your attention.
I don't hate having things called to my attention. I just delivered the news
Yeah,
story. Do you have anything to add to it?
No, I don't care. It's weird that they're doing a Hellstrom show now, but not a Ghost Rider show, because at least I know what one of those things are.
I bet his name is going to
be.
be Eric Hellstrom.
I thought it was like Marcus Hellstrom. No, it's Diamond.
Hellstrom.
Diamond Hellstrom.
Rest assured that his name is going to have Hellstrom somewhere in it. It's the name of the show
Hellstrom. That's
and the name of his character.
Yep.
Kind of like Drake.
Yep. Kind of like Drake. Tim Drake, codename Drake. Drake everywhere.
Drake Maverick.
What are we doing here?
So, Batman's post-Tom King creative team has been announced, Nick.
Yeah.
Would you like to take a guess? Would you like to take a guess as to who it is based on the...
I'm gonna guess that it is Chuck Austin and Scotty Young.
Well, you're 50% right, my friend. Now, I should mention to everyone out there that I failed math as a child. Writer James Tynion IV and artists Tony Daniel and Danny Mickey and Tomiu Moray will take over as Batman creative team following the impending departure of writer Tom King. All four creators have worked on different volumes of Detective Comics. Of course, Tynion had that popular run on Detective after Rebirth that I know you were quite high on, Nick. And and I'm trying to read through here. They'll take over on January 8th with Batman number 86. So the thought, and there's a lot of rumors going around, Nick, a lot of rumors out there about what this run is building towards, which is another run to follow, and what that run could entail, which there are rumors out there that this is leading to Luke Fox, of all people, taking over as Batman. What are your thoughts on this creative team, Nick, as a Batman fan? And also, what are your thoughts on the Luke Fox rumor?
Creative team first, I'm very excited about. Tony Daniel's a good artist. Danny Mickey, I would have a hard time picking out his art out of the lineup just because I'm not a huge art guy. And he doesn't have a reputation in my mind.
I believe he's an
but James Tynion IV, as you've said, did an outstanding run on Detective Comics post Rebirth. So has a good handle on the character, has a good handle on the mythos, and so I'm very excited for that. As far as the Luke Fox stuff goes, I don't really have much of a thought on it because this is their thing that they do every 5 or 6 or 7 years, where they replace Batman for a while. Scott Snyder did his version of it with James Gordon. Grant Morrison did his version of it with Dick Grayson. Going back to the 90s, you had John Paul Valley and then Dick Grayson. This is just something that DC has found a lot of appeal in doing for the last 25 years or so. So, sure, why not? They're going to do this Luke Fox thing for a couple of years, inject some needed diversity into the Batman line, and then if this starts in because really Daniel's run will take up the entirety of 2020 since they're going to monthly. So if this starts in 2021, it'll be over by 2023 or 4 at the latest, and then Bruce will be back. So no skin off my back as far as I'm concerned.
What if Luke Fox takes off the way that Miles Morales did for Spider-Man?
Then we'll get 2 Batman characters, and we'll have a Bruce book and a Luke Fox book, and that's fine. That's the best of both worlds, is it not?
But you did not like it when they did Batman Incorporated in addition to the Dick Grayson Batman book.
That's true. And you know why I didn't like that? Because it was written by somebody who I felt like didn't understand the character of Batman more so than the idea itself.
Nonetheless, we also have news from Tony Daniel's world. He is drawing his first covers for Marvel Comics in many, many years. He's done the covers for Amazing Spider-Man 35 and 36, coming out in December. So, nothing major there, but kind of cool. He's back on covers for Marvel, but also clearly still working with DC, but no longer under that exclusivity deal, it seems. And then finally, we got to offer up something to our listeners, Nick. We got to give them something to remember us by. I mean, you were just in Athens over the weekend, partaking of some beverages, I understand it. So would you find it in your heart to walk over to your
What kind of beverages, Greg?
well, a little bit of the bubbly.
I actually did have a little bit of the bubbly, but there you
A
are.
little bit of the bubbly because DC Comics is bringing us a little bit of the bubbly, Nick. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
1 week ahead of All Elite Wrestling's TV debut, they are teasing a partnership. Well, not teasing. They flat out said it is a partnership with DC Comics. And they unveiled this partnership with by tweeting out an image by Howard Porter with colors by Hi-Fi of AEW champion Chris Jericho. It's an awesome image, an awesome drawing from the veteran artist Howard Porter, Justice League fame. And they said in the tweet that we will be giving you more information soon about the AEW collaboration with DC Comics. Nick, we are contractually obligated to talk about wrestling and comics crossovers, but what are your thoughts on this? Does this mean we could be getting an AEW comic book, or is it more likely designs for magazines, for advertising, things of that nature?
I don't know. It's hard to know, really. I think we're probably just going to see some designs, some advertising, some promotional images, maybe some posters for events and stuff. Just because even WWE is kind of they're stepping back from their current wrestling comic output. And while I know that people like Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks are big video game proponents, who would be the primary comic book driver from an AEW standpoint? Cody, I suppose.
Cody's a big fan. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's more my skepticism involving wrestling related comics,
Sure.
especially those partnered with by one of the big two, more so than my skepticism of the concept. It's just these things historically have never worked, so I can't see AEW investing capital in something that has literally never worked.
We should mention though that AEW is working very closely with TNT under the Warner umbrella,
Yes.
which owns DC Comics, obviously. So perhaps, and they even
Yes.
tweeted out that Batman is all elite. So perhaps there is going to be a DC Universe element to this collaboration. I don't know. Either way, exciting stuff all around. And what a great segue, Nick. What a brilliant job by you of positioning that as the last story of the rundown. Do you know why?
Because it's time for the Wrestling Minute.
That is correct, sir. It is time for the Wrestling Minute.
Well, what about the Entertainment Minute? When was that coming?
Well, we might have to have 2 different minutes.
two different minutes.
The Wrestling
Oh
Minute
God,
is the minute.
that
my
would
father
take 20
grew up.
minutes though.
Oh. Anyway,
what are we
it
doing
was a
with our
loaded
lives?
week, a huge week in the world of wrestling, actually. I don't want to undersell this, because last Wednesday night was the debut of WWE NXT on the USA Network. And the 1 hour that was on USA Network was outstanding.
Yes, absolutely.
It was not a night without problems, however, because unfortunately the second hour of the show was being broadcast live on the WWE Network, which appeared to be woefully unprepared for the demand that was needed. Because I can't speak for anybody else, only myself, Nick, but I literally could not watch the show that night. I tried every device that I have in my home. My internet was fine. I checked it multiple times, but I checked every device in my home. I'd used my phone when it came down to it. I tried my PlayStation 4. I tried my Roku TV. I even tried my individual older generation Roku. Nothing worked. I could not get logged into my account. I tried a web browser. It didn't work. And this was the case for a lot of people, Nick, that wanted to keep watching NXT and weren't able to. And it's a shame because, again, like I stand by what I said. That 1 hour on USA Network was the best hour of wrestling on television last week. It was amazing. What were your thoughts on NXT's debut?
Outstanding, as you said, especially that USA Network hour. They front-loaded the show, which was a good idea because they knew they only had 1 hour on national TV, so they went and threw it out there. And that 1 hour was, hard to find anything to dislike about it. Then, of course, The back hour, slows down a little bit, but also was plagued by the technical difficulties, which luckily it's going to be a short-term problem. Even if they had them again tonight as we record this, this is the last episode that'll have that issue because from now on there'll be 2 hours on USA Network, so no skin off our backs, I suppose. So very exciting. Can't wait for next week when the Wednesday Night Wars begin in earnest.
Yes, and I really now wait a minute. What's Ernest have to do with this?
Oh, Ernest always has everything to do with everything, as you know.
Ernest goes to the Wednesday Night Wars. I thought it was a great show. The women's match was sensational, so good. And other than that, Raw was good, and I thought SmackDown was a little lackluster last week by normal standards.
Mm-hmm.
This week picked up a little bit, I thought, in both departments. Raw was really good, SmackDown was solid, and some really good matches across the way. The Fatal 5-Way on Monday night, match of the week so far. Well, match of the week until Keith Lee and Donovan Dijakovic tonight, which probably took that spot.
Yes, Greg, before we started the recording, was yelling and touching himself during the match.
Absolutely I was, and I would do it again. I probably will do it again when I go back and watch the recording of the show later. And and the 5-way match was great. And King Corbin, good start to his reign as he had a good match with Chadwick Gable.
We are not going to be able to ever get through a wrestling minute for the rest of the eternity of the show without Greg singing the praises of Baron Corbin.
I want you to bow down to your king. That's what I want you to do.
You mean the King of Kings?
No, that's totally different.
All hail.
That's a totally different king. Remember, he got slayed. That king's been slayed. The beast has been slayed
numerous times.
The question is, will he? Yeah, you'd think if he was slayed, he would. That'd be it. But I guess much like comics, no one's ever really dead.
Oh.
What about the Fiend? Do you think the Fiend's going to get slayed?
I hope not. Too early for him to be taking a loss to anyone.
I agree. Keep doing what they're doing with him. Keep him strong. And I guess the logical thing is to build to that Finn Balor Demon rematch, right?
I would assume so, yes.
All right.
But hard to know if we'll ever get there or not.
Indeed. Well, with all that being said, Nick, I mean, good gosh almighty, I can't think of anything else to add to the show.
No, nor can I, except for we're going to close the show as we do each and every week with a little musical exit from WWE Hall of Famer Jim Ross, who this week I picked a song out just special for JR. It's a song, people have asked me in the last few days why I would do some of the things that I do. And so here's a song from me to all of you, but sung by Jim Ross. So JR, I don't know if you know this one, but looking forward to your rendition of it.
Well, once again, I appreciate it. And I got to say, I don't know a thing about this song now, but
I think you do.
Let me sing it to you like this. Get a tune going. I know, get it going there. Get Danny in the truck. Get the tune going. Folks, I'd like to sing a song about the American dream. No, not Dusty Rhodes, son of a plumber, stardust, if you will. Are you an assassin, or are you an errand boy? Are you an assassin, or are you an errand boy? About me, about you, about the way our American hearts, or Canadian, or Mexican, or whatever nationality you may be, folks. I'm not trying to single anybody out. Beat down in the bottom of our chests about the special feeling we get in the cockles of our hearts. Maybe below the cockles now. Maybe in the subcockle area. It's not for me to say. Maybe even in the liver. Maybe even in the kidney. Maybe even in the colon. Which I'd have to mention to you, I had a portion of my colon removed at one point. We don't know. I am just a regular Joe with a regular job. I'm your average white suburbanite slob. I like football and porno and books about war. I've got an average house with a nice hardwood floor. My wife and my job, my kids and my car. My feet on my table and a Cuban cigar. Buck naked. But sometimes that just ain't enough to keep a man like me interested. Oh no! No way! No, I've got to go out and have fun at someone else's expense. Oh yeah! Yeah! Oh yeah! I drive really slow in the ultra-fast lane, while people behind me are going insane. I'm an asshole. Yes, I am an asshole. Well, I use public toilets and I piss on the seat. I walk around in the summertime saying, how about this damn heat? I'm an asshole. Folks, it's as simple as this. I am an asshole. I'm an asshole. Maybe I shouldn't be singing this song, ranting and raving and carrying on. Maybe they're right when they tell my ass that I'm wrong. Then again, no, I'm an asshole. Me, I'm an asshole. You know what I'm going to do, Nick? I'm going to get myself a 1967 Cadillac Eldorado convertible, just like the kind that Leroy McGirt used to drive around. Hot pink with whale skin hubcaps, an all-leather cow interior, and big brown baby seal eyes for headlights. And then I'm going to drive around in that son of a bitch at 115 miles per hour, getting 1 mile per gallon, sucking down quarter-pounder cheeseburgers from McDonald's in the old-fashioned, non-biodegradable styrofoam containers. And then when I'm done sucking down those greaseball burgers, I'm going to wipe my ass with the American flag. And then I'm going to toss the styrofoam container right out the side, and there ain't a goddamn thing anybody can do about it. You know why? Because we got the bomb. That's why. 2 words: nuclear fucking weapons, okay? Russia, Germany, Romania, they can all have the democracy they want. They can have a big democracy cakewalk right through the middle of Tiananmen by God Square. And it won't make a lick of a difference. Because we have got the bombs, we've got the Undertaker, we got Kane, we got the hosses. John Wayne's not dead. He's frozen. And as soon as we find the cure for cancer, we're going to thaw out the Duke, and he's going to be pretty goddamn pissed off. Do you know why? Have you ever taken a cold shower, folks? I did. I did with those twins that I can't remember the names of from back in the 60s. They were large, obese individuals. Well, multiply that by 15 million times. That's how pissed off the Duke is going to be. I'm going to get the Duke and John Cassavetes and Lee Marvin and Sam Peckinpah and a case of whiskey and drive down to Texas. You know what? Why don't you just shut up and sing the song, pal? Because I'm an asshole. I am an asshole. I'm an asshole. Yo-yo, yo-yo, yo-yo. I am an asshole. Yo-yo, yo-yo, yo-yo. A-S-S-H-O-L-E. A-S-S-H-O-L-E. Arf, arf, arf. Arf, 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 arf. Fung, ox, tum, a fung, tum, a fling, chum. I'm an asshole and I'm proud of it.